number 13. Romans chapter number 13. We'll start reading at verse number 8. Read here 3 verses. Romans chapter number 13, verse number 8. It says this, "Owe no man anything, but to love one another, for he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. For this, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. If there be any other commandment that is briefly comprehended in the saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor, therefore love is fulfilling of the law." Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you and praise you for who you are. We just thank you for love, and we just wouldn't even know love. We couldn't even define what love is if it wasn't for you. And I appreciate the Lord that I've accepted your love, and I know exactly firsthand experience what your love is. But Lord, with the law, we are not going to measure up to the law. But it says in the Bible here we can fulfill the law through love. Just be with us here this morning as we share this thought. Lord, just be with. Just let me be 100% obedient to you, and everyone that's here, let it fall on some good ground and just take root, and it be a help to everybody here. In Jesus' name, amen. We see in verse number 8, it says, "Owe no man anything." Let me just say, I owe nobody anything. We owe no man nothing. We owe God everything. Amen. We owe God every single thing. And even though we don't owe man anything, here's what the Bible says. In verse number 8, it says, "We owe no man anything but to love one another." See, I don't owe man anything, but guess what? We ought to love one another. We ought to have love for one another. And in the church, members to members ought to have love. Out in the world, person to person ought to have love. The church members out to the world ought to have love. And truthfully, strangers to strangers ought to have love in this world. There's no reason to not love one another. We all ought to love one another. And Genesis says that he made man in his image. Genesis 1:27 says he created man and he formed man. He created him in his image, and in his image he is love. He made man not just to save him. He didn't just save the church. He didn't just make, man is not just the church. Man is not just the saved, but he made man in his image. Think about that just a minute. That means everybody out in this world, he made them too. They're man. He made man in his image. And the thing that messes us all up is one thing, 3-letter word, and it's sin. Sin messes us up. Each and every one of us were clothed in flesh, and we all are sinners. And while he created man for one thing, and to love. We ought to have love. But what holds us from having that love is sin. We like to go our own way. We like to do what we want, and we don't have the love that we ought to have. You look out in this world and just some of the news stories that I could read headlines, but I don't need to. There's too much hatred and there's too much violence in this world. There's too much man doing what man wants. But man's created in his image. It means they're not being like Christ and what he wants them to be. They're not loving, and we're made to love. Verse number 8 says, "No man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law." If we just love another, we would fulfill the law. Now you think back to Genesis. God created Adam and God created Eve, and he put them there in that garden. And here he did, all God did is he gave them one command. He gave them one law, one rule. And he said, hey, you can eat of any tree, but don't eat of this tree. You cannot eat of that fruit. He made man and gave them one thing. And they couldn't listen to that one rule, that one command. And that was the fall of man. That was the fall of mankind. Romans 5:12 says, wherefore is by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men. Just because of that one command, not eating of the tree, we're all sinners, and we've all fallen short. We all. Then you think of Exodus. Then God gave a whole list of commands. He gave them 10 commandments. He gave 10 commandments, 10 rules, 10 laws that people ought to live by. Moses goes up on that mount. Moses comes down, and what happens? They're already broken when he comes down. Figuratively and literally, they're broken. He gets mad, he breaks those 10 commandments, but also he sees the people, and they've done put another God before God. They've broken the 10 commandments. We know what happens. That law is given, and that law cannot be followed. We cannot keep that law. And generation after generation, after person, we're never going to measure up to that law. God gave instructions. He said, if you'll just sacrifice, you'll give up this offering or that offering, that'll be enough. He said he set up the altar, and he told the people how to live and how to get that atonement, get that covering for their sins. But guess what? It was never going to be enough. But we read in verse number 8, he says, for he that loveth another has fulfilled the law. He's saying here that even though you're never going to be able to cover up all those sins, and even though we're always going to be measure up short, we can fulfill the law if we do one thing, and he said, love. One commandment in the garden, broken. 10 commandments in Exodus can't be kept. But he says, if you want to fulfill the law, here's what I want you to do now in 2021. I want you to love. If you'll just love, that's all I want you to do. I truly believe to this day, he wants us to be saved. He wants us to live a life that's holy and pleasing to him and just do and live how he wants, but also he just wants us to love. And there's a lack of love. We need to have that love because we can't keep those commandments. And I think just to prove that, because he says, for he that loveth another has fulfilled the law. He says that fulfills the law, and then he gives the law. Look at verse number 9. It says, for this thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not covet. If there be any other commandment that is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. This verse mentions just 5 commandments, and there's 5 things here that honestly we can't even keep 5. Let alone 10, you can't keep the 5 here. And here he is saying, there's 5 commandments that I'm giving you, but look at the very last part of verse number 9. He says, if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. You know what he's saying? He says you're going to have to love others as much as you love yourself. Romans 13:9 is saying this. You've got love. You definitely got love inside of you. I guarantee the most unlovable person in here that don't show any outside love, don't do anything for nobody, you've got love. You know why? You got love for yourself. And that's what Romans 13 is saying. He says, if you don't love nobody, I know you got it for yourself. You know what we got to do? We've got to harness that love. We've got to get a grip on that love. We've got to focus that love in the right direction. Because I don't know one person in this world, even the lost that's out that may never darken the doors of a church. They love themselves. They've got love, and it's love for themselves. We all got love. And you take that love and that we've got for ourselves, and you put that love on somebody else, like verse number 9 is saying, thou shalt love thy neighbor as yourself. See, you've got love for yourself. Love your neighbor like you love yourself. That's what he's saying. Think of all the junk. Think of all the news headlines. Think of all the things that have taken place in this world that keeps a lot of you even in here with a job because you have to deal with these criminals. But all the junk that we go through in this life that would just be avoided if we love. They wouldn't be near as much crime, would they, if we just loved others? Can you imagine all the kindness and the mercy and the goodness and just the helpfulness we would have all around if we just loved neighbors like we do ourselves? Because we've got love. Everybody's got love for themselves. Even the lost does. But we've got to love it, take that love and apply it to our neighbors. Verse 10 says, this love worketh no ill to his neighbors. He's saying in love, there can be no ill come from love. Love produces something different. And in other words, it ain't ill. You can't be ill towards your neighbors, and that is not one of the things that comes from love. But here's where we are at. Where we're at because of Genesis. Because of the fall of man. That's why we're here. It's because of sin. It's because of a love for ourselves more than a love for others. That's why we are where we are. And here's the thing. We think, well, the Bible said that it's never going to get much better. The Bible said there's going to be a falling away. The Bible said that there's going to come a time where everybody's going to be on evil. Haven't we all said that before? We all say that, and it's almost like we fulfill that. Well, the Bible said there's going to be a falling away, but it don't have to be us. It don't have to be me. I can control me. And if anything, it ain't going to be a falling away. It's going to be a falling in and falling into love with others and trying to help others more than I've ever helped others before. Amen? That's what we need. And maybe there's a great falling away because we've got a mindset. Well, that's the way it's supposed to be. Well, that don't mean that's the way I've got to be. They've got to be somebody left. They've got to be somebody left. Well, the Bible said there'd be a falling away. I knew that day was coming. Yes, there's going to be a falling away. But let me just say this. As long as I live, and as long as I've got breath, and as long as you've got breath, and as long as these church doors are open, we've got to have love. And loving our neighbors. And loving and trying to help people in need. In Genesis, that one command couldn't be kept. In Exodus, the 10 commandments couldn't be kept. Mankind's hearts are fixated on sin, and it seems like there's evil all around. Our hearts are fixated on themselves. Others are sometimes just a mere afterthought. We just don't even think about others like we should. But it says in verse 10, love worketh no ill to his neighbor. It don't worketh ill to your neighbor. Here's this. Therefore, love is fulfilling of the law. Who is love? God's love, isn't it? God is love. And the only way the law could be fulfilled, the only way the law could be helped, the only way that we could have real atonement and real covering for our sins had to be God sending Jesus, that perfect lamb, that perfect sacrifice for our sins. Because we know in Romans, he says the wages of sin is death. In other words, the price of everybody's sin just because of what Adam did. Even for these young people, as I look around, they've not sinned nowhere near like some of the rest of us, but they're still sinners and they still falling short. And that's the wages of sin. Because Adam sinned, we all got to pay those wages, and it's death. But love worketh no ill to his neighbor. I think about this. Christ could have came to this earth and worketh ill. He could have. Christ could have came to this earth and he could have settled the score immediately. But we read, love worketh no ill. He didn't do that. He came to love. He came to accept. Jesus is love. God is love. In the same way that he sent his son to seek and save that which is lost, we got to be doing the same thing today. See, there's coming a day where, yeah, he will settle the count. He will settle the score. But he didn't come to do that. He came to love. And really what we've got to do is what verse 10 said, therefore love is fulfilling of the law. Christ is love. Christ fulfilled the law. What can we do? What can we do in this day that we live? And this is the title of the message is this. Fulfilling the law. And I cannot fulfill the law. He fulfilled the law. But if I can piggyback off of what he did in his works, fulfilling the law through love. That's what we've got to do. That's the thought this morning, is fulfilling the law through love. I want to look at that word love, L-O-V-E. using those letters, give you 4 things to think about this morning. Number 1, obviously, is we've got to love. It says in verse number 10, love worketh no ill to his neighbor, therefore love is fulfilling the law. If I want to fulfill the law through love, I've got to have love. That don't take a rocket scientist. I didn't use a college education there to figure that one out. It's just, if you want to love, you've got to have love. In order I want to fulfill that law, I have to love. And specifically, I've got to love how Christ loved. Think about how Christ came to Peter. And he asked him, Peter, do you love me? And this is in John 21, 15 through 17. Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? It says, and so when they had dined, Jesus said to Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? And he said unto them, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. In other words, yes, you know that I love you. And you know what Jesus' response is? He says, feed my lambs. If you really love me, and there's some real love about you, you know what you're going to do? You're going to feed your lambs. He didn't say you're going to do this, or you're going to do that, or you're going to give a certain number, and at that number, the giving. No, he says, feed your lambs. And that's amazing to me. He asked him again. He said to him a second time, and this is in John 21, 15, he says, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest I love thee. And he said unto them, feed my sheep. He says, feed my lambs, and then he says, feed my sheep. He don't say, that's what love is what I'm trying to say. He says, if you really love me, Peter, and you really do love me, then you're going, the only thing I need to see out of you in return is not attendance, not checking a box, not reading your Bible, but it all goes into doing these things. But he says, feed my sheep. In other words, the sheep have to be important. Others have to be important. And we've got to have some love, not of myself, but not just of him, but if I really love him, I'm going to feed the lambs. And he asks again, feed the sheep. He asks again, he says, feed my sheep. Jesus questions Peter about his love, and if you're going to do anything, you're going to have to feed the sheep. I'll tell you, if he measured his love solely on that, I wonder how much love that we have for him this morning. How much love do we have for Christ if it's based on just feeding sheep? Say, well, you're the pastor. You feed the sheep. You're the shepherd. You feed. No, he says, if you love me, you will do these. And Jesus follows up with a command to Peter. He says, feed those sheep. And he's getting to the point that if Peter, if you really love the master, and you really love me, and you can answer to the fact that you do love me, then I want to see what is your relationship to the sheep. And how do you treat those in your church? How do you treat those in the community? And how do you treat the lost in the dying world? You know, this isn't an ordinary love. I know there's a phileo love mentioned here, but mainly it's an agape love that we ought to have. In other words, there's no conditions set. You just love, and if you don't love me back, I don't care. I've just got an agape love, and I just love you. That's what Christ did on Calvary. He just loved. If he'd done it and he set any other standard and said, Dustin, you've got to do this, or Dustin, you've got to do that, he'd have come down off that cross because I've never been good enough, and you've never been good enough. But he hung there on the cross, and he's the perfect satisfaction, the perfect thing that satisfied that law and fulfilled that law that we couldn't fulfill. And all those times when we broke the law, he came to fulfill that law, and it was through love. I'm not working to be saved. I'm working because I am saved. And I just love him, and I love all that he's done for me. He fulfilled that law through love, and he expects us to simply love. We've got to love. Another thing we've got to have is we've got to have others. L-O-V. L-O is the others. We've got to have others. Got to have to be important. If we're in verse 10, it says, therefore love is fulfilling the law. You can have love. You can have more love than you've ever had. You can have more love than anybody on this planet. But if it's for yourself and not for others, we're in the wrong category. It's in the wrong place. But in order to fulfill that law, it's got to be through love. Not just love, but love for others. Others are going to have to sometimes take a priority and take a precedent in our life. There's going to be a time where we might have to just cut off the TV, or we may have to just quit doing this or doing that. Put our own yard work to the side and say, my gosh, I'm going to have to love somebody. I'm going to have to love, but it's going to have to be specifically toward others. But you know, naturally, that's not the way we're wired. We're wired to do for ourselves. I can't let this go. I've got to take care of my stuff. When I get my stuff, then I'll get some leftovers, some leftover love for somebody else. That's how we are. That's how I am. That's how we're wired. That's just being honest this morning. What if we gave the first when we're pumped up, when we're still got the energy? That was the love that we showed to others. Not after we've worked all day and got our yard work done and it's about midnight and you're running in on somebody's driveway on two wheels. Hey, I care about you. What if we did the first before we done for ourselves? Can you imagine what would happen if we put others first? How much love and how much it would fulfill the Lamb of God if we just had love and specifically toward others. Thinking of others and doing for others, it can be difficult. It is, because we're not wired that way. We get caught up in our own world, and it's almost like the devil even wants to get us so busy and so caught up that we just don't think we've got time. We get up first thing in the morning, we come in late in the evening, but at some place, at some point, on a daily basis, we have to put others somewhere in our life. If we don't, we're gonna reap what we sow, and it won't be others. It'll be us. It's got to be about others. Others cannot just be an afterthought. Others got to be a before thought, and a thought that where can I work somebody else into my life? Not to mention, I'll tell you, people are hard to love. Even people you're supposed to love, they're hard to love sometimes. I know for Ashley, I'm hard to love sometimes. I am. Got up this morning, oh, my back from the hospice, my back. Grow up. You'll live. Thank you. I'm getting ready to go to church and preach. I'll tell you, what we've got to do is, therefore, love is fulfilling of the law. Philippians 2:3 says, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in the lowliness of mind. Let each esteem other better than themselves. That sums it up pretty good. Get low in the lowliness of your mind. Raise up others before yourself. If we do that, I wonder in a week how many times we could check the box saying, I've done that. I did that. And the more days we do that, the more I think God will bless, and the more things, and that's what it's all about, being a Christian. And it's hard. Others just can't be an afterthought. But Christ gave us an example, and He gave us an example that He came and He lived, and everything Christ did was for love, but for others. You can't show me many times in the Word of God where He did for Himself, and the only reason He did it was for Himself. John 15:12 says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. As much love as I had for you, and all of the death, the bleeding, and the sacrifice of that cross, and me giving up myself for you, I want you to have that kind of love for others. And in John 15:13, greater love hath no man than this, than to lay down his life for his friends. He's speaking of himself and him laying down his life, but from time to time we've got to lay down our own life. As much as it might be easier to kick up our feet after work, and as much as it's easy, it's just not your personality, just think of others. Invite them to church. Tell them about the singing coming up. Tell them about the Father's Day, whatever we're doing, I don't know. Whatever we do here at the church, invite them. That's as easy as it gets. But you know, you get to love and then others. I get to the V. I was like, what in the world starts with V? I started thinking, I'll be honest with you, this is to me the pivotal point in love. And it's void. says in verse 10, love worketh no ill to his neighbor, therefore love is fulfilling the law. How do I fulfill that law? Through love. I got to have love. I got to have others, but I got to void myself of some things. The word void means containing nothing or empty. I'll give you three things here that we need to void ourselves of. It's one, I got to void myself of myself. If I get too full of myself and I get too filled up of myself, I'm no help for nobody else. I got to leave room for others. Our own hearts cannot be so full that there's no other room. But you know people where it's all about them and it's only about them. But we've got to have a place in our heart for other people, not just ourselves. I'll tell you, we could rewind that last sentence about 1 million times this week and it'd do us some good. We got to have a place in our heart, not just for ourselves, but for others. When we're full of our own lusts, our own desires, our own selves, there ain't no way you can help somebody else. We got to void ourselves. We got to get rid of those things. We got to empty ourselves of ourselves. You can't have room for Christ and to live like Christ filled with myself. There's just no way to do it. But also we got to get rid of sin in our life. You got to void yourself. You got to clean some sin out of your life. I'll tell you, when I'm living in sin and I've got a mess, I can't help other people. Because then what are you going to say to somebody and try to help them? You sinning and you falling short and you being the mess. It's impossible. We got to void ourselves of sin. Hebrews 12:1 says, it says, wherefore seeing we are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, and it says this, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does evilly beset us and run with patience the race that's before us. We've got to run the race, run with patience, but how are we going to do it? Lay aside the sin. Lay aside what easily besets us. It means it ensnares us, it entraps us, it entangles us, and that's what sin does. And so easily it does that. Sin and living in sin will keep us from doing what verse 10 says, and that's fulfilling that law with love. But then we also got to void ourselves and clean ourselves out of the world. You start seeing the world, my neighbor got this car, my coworker got this, and they got that. That's worldly. And I'll tell you, you're not going to take it with you when you go. And I've had to come to that conclusion. There's been times in my Christian life, in my Christian walk, I thought I had to have this and I thought I had to have that. But I'll tell you, the most happy that I've been is I've realized I don't need that. I don't have to have that. I don't have to do these things to make me happy. Things don't make me happy. What makes me happy is the ministry and doing things for others and loving others. Our heart cannot be full of the world and these outside things. And it can't be full of ourselves. It can't be full of sin and help others. That's the V and that's void. And we have to void ourselves of these things. We've got to love. We've got to be about others. We've got to void ourselves of these things. But this is lastly. Verse 10, it says, therefore love is fulfilling that law. And if I want to fulfill the law, here's what I got to do. The E is for examine ourselves. We've got to examine ourselves on a daily basis. Don't let it go a month. Don't let it go forever before you examine yourselves. I've got to examine myself daily. In order to fill that law, I've got to have love. I've got to have others. I've got to get some things out of my life. Get all the trash out so I'm a help and encouragement to somebody else. But lastly, if I want to fulfill that law, I've got to examine myself. Where do I stand? Now, I know this is hard, but I bet you somebody in here thought this. When I say examine myself, somebody else popped in your brain. I'm not as bad as they are. Because that's what we do. We examine ourselves based on somebody else. Or we examine ourselves based on somebody that's not in the building right now. But that's not what we examine ourselves on. I examine myself on Christ and Christ alone. And I'll tell you that right there, that's tough to measure up. And I've got to examine myself. And you've got to examine yourself. 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, examine yourselves. Whether you be in faith, prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves how Jesus Christ is in you, except you be reprobates. we got to take a moment and examine ourselves. Examine means to scrutinize ourselves. We don't like that. I don't like to scrutinize myself and put myself under a microscope. Examine ourselves means to discipline ourselves or prove ourselves. I don't like none of that stuff. Neither do you. But here's the thing. If I'm going to love others, and I'm going to do what Christ told me to do, and others are going to be important, and I'm going to really avoid myself of these things of my life, I'm going to have to examine myself to see if they're in my life. If we don't examine ourselves, who's going to examine us? It's easy to look at other people, but I can look at somebody right now and say, man, they're a mess. I'm glad I ain't them. Shoo, I'm in good shape. But you know, part of that examining is proving yourself. If I look at somebody else and say, I'm glad I ain't them, you ain't going to prove yourself. You're not going to prove them and make them change. The only thing that can change is Jesus moving on the inside and Him changing. And I just wonder what needs to change in us and what can we examine and what can we do to examine ourselves. See, Satan wants us to look at them, and Satan wants us to say, hey, stay in that place that you're at, knowing that staying where you're at is better than anything else. Better than changing. It's easier than changing. Just stay where you're at. We got to take a minute and examine ourselves. That 2 Corinthians, you're taking notes, 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, examine yourselves whether you be in the faith. When we start examining ourselves, we better realize, are you really in the faith? Are you really saved? Do you say that, or does others see that? That's the thing. When you examine yourselves, what do you see? What does others see? It says, examine yourselves whether you be in the faith, but prove yourselves. Not just examine yourself, but prove yourself. Prove yourself, examine yourself, put yourself under the microscope, put yourself under the test. Where do you fall? And the test is Jesus hanging on that cross, giving up His life for somebody that don't deserve it. We hate even the thoughts of examining ourselves, let alone examine it based on Him. We got to examine ourselves and know that you're not your own anymore. If you're saved, you're bought with a price. And the Bible says you're no longer, you're a purchased possession, that we're His. And if we're really His, I'm not even my own to act on my own and to do what I want to do. So the fact that I have the ability and I get another opportunity to examine myself, that's a great opportunity this morning. It's to look at myself, and I'm thankful for that. And He's not called me out of here or said, hey, Dustin is a waste, and I'm tired of trying to mold that clay and to form Dustin into what he needs to be. I'm tired of even fooling with him. He's not throwing me off to the side. If you're sitting here this morning, He's not throwing you off to the side. He's still molding you. He's trying to make you what He wants you to be, not what you want to be. You try to be what you want to be, and man, you'll be as unhappy as anybody could possibly be. We are His. We are bought with a price. We couldn't keep one law in the garden. We can't keep the 10 Commandments. But the only way we can fulfill the law, Jesus fulfilled it. We've accepted it. Where He's living on the inside. And if He's living on the inside, we can fulfill the law. It's not natural. It's not what we like. We got to do what the Bible says. Crucify the flesh. Crucify that flesh. And follow Him. Put that trash to the side. Void ourselves of those things. Love and have a place for others. But here's a part of service. We just have to examine ourselves. If Tammy will come to the piano, she's going to play something soft. That's the message this morning, is just fulfilling the law through love. Christ fulfilled it. I didn't do a thing to deserve it. But here I am, accepted Him, trying to live for Him, and I just got to keep on keeping on. So do you. I just appreciate the Lord, don't you? I appreciate the fact, I appreciate this, the fact that He's given us an opportunity